When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. My guest today on Breaking Silos is one of my favorite people to watch on LinkedIn, one of a real up-and-comer, rising star in our industry. I'm joined by Alyssa Green. Alyssa is the University Photography Manager at the University of Montevallo. Hey, Alyssa.
Hey, Shane. Great to see you. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Sure. We were joking before we hit record here that we've been trying to do this for months, and we finally made it. So we're here, and I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm glad that we could finally make it work out between kids and sickness, and it's not life if you don't have those things.
Life. Exactly. So I'm excited to talk to you because I have a real respect for kind of the folks in higher ed that are deemed, sort of behind the scenes contributors, the graphic designers and the photographers and videographers of the world. So I'm interested, Alyssa, and kind of talk about how your role has evolved over the years and where, you'd still like to see it and similar roles in the creative realm evolve in, let's say, the next 5 years, and, kind of talk about the importance of contributing to strategy.
Sure. So I guess to start with how my role has evolved since I started. So I started in higher education 8 years ago. When I first started, it was coming in as exclusively as a photographer. I was there to serve. I was there to capture events, athletic games, theater performances. And then as time went on, there's not really a way for a photographer to go this way, just, outside. So there was an opportunity to do social media along with photography. So I raised my hand to do that and did that for a little while. And then after that, there was a need for videography. And so I, again, raised my hand for that. And so it kept branching outward on how I could grow. And then after, I guess that was around COVID. And so we really saw the importance of videography. And so we were able to hire a full-time videographer. And that allowed me to, and I forgot to say, we also were able to hire a full-time social media manager. And so that took me from those roles back to what I really love, and that's photography. And so that's when I transitioned into being the university photography manager. And so that brought back a renewed focus, I would say. I've always been passionate about photography, but in my desire to grow, my desire to do more, and wondering what that looked like as a photographer, I think that being in those uncomfortable positions, it really helped me to say, hey, like, you've grown, but yeah, photography is what you want to do. But I don't just take pictures. I don't just capture events. I think that doing those other positions and roles has allowed me to see that I need to be more strategic and intentional. And I'm marketing the university with my photography. And so I still have a customer service mindset, but I'm actually there to, how can this event that I'm covering be used to market the university? How can this individual I'm working with be used on social media? And so I'm thinking more strategically, because that's what I do. I'm in marketing and communications. And so, but it's taken a couple of years to realize that. And so that's a little bit about how my role has changed in the last 8 years. And to your next question, I think I've already seen a little bit of an evolution. And so now I think that I've got this focus and understanding of this is how I can be more strategic. But what does that look like with relationships? I think that relationships come naturally for me. I really like people. I genuinely enjoy people. And so I really don't meet a stranger. And when I meet someone, I want to find out their story. And my department, University Marketing and Communications, is works alongside advancement, which is fundraising for the university. And so I think having that opportunity to see how fundraising works and working with our donors and our alumni and the people who keep our students at the university and are able to keep the university infrastructure growing in the way that it needs to, I'm thinking about how those relationships apply to photography and how I don't know how that relates as far as fundraising or saying I'm going to do this hybrid, but maybe that's how I need to be thinking is how can I harness this love for people and this natural strength of relationship building and combine those two to, evolve from there. I don't know what that looks like, but that's now how I'm thinking.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's interesting because we always talk about, how little time we have to capture people's attention, right? And I feel like, photography is one of those compelling platforms and mediums that can really uniquely do that. Uh, you see publications all the time, and you can tell when social media posts are like it's the photography's not professional, and it really makes a difference. And I'm glad to hear that and it sounds like your university are thinking about your role in a more strategic way. And you mentioned building relationships across campus. I've always sort of admired the folks behind the camera in terms of their ability to sort of build bridges and be that connection point for marketing and the rest of campus, because you are so visible and so active. And so talk about some ways that, you've sort of actively sought out those partnerships across campus and sort of to highlight your strategic importance as the photographer for the university.
It's twofold, partially in that individuals on campus seek me out because they want my services and how I can help them photograph a theater performance, an athletic game, or a new chemistry brochure is needed. Therefore, they need photography. And so when they reach out, that helps me to connect with them. But then there are times that I say, hey, we haven't had any photos of, well, for instance, we now have a nursing program at the university, and that just launched this fall. And so reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're going to need to market this. We're going to need to put this on social media. We're going to need to start, we're thinking about materials. And I'm sure that they are also thinking about that, but they're not sure who to reach out to yet. They're not sure how to make all that happen because it's brand new. And so reaching out to those individuals and having that kind of foresight of, hey, what would prospective students want to hear more about? What would those parents of those students want to learn more about? And so when you think about it through that lens, then that helps me as the photographer think, okay, then who should I be reaching out to on campus? And I do have a really unique role in that way, in that I have many relationships in many departments across campus. I'm not in just marketing and communications. And that's the unique thing I think about marketing and communications is that we work with everybody. We're not just in the education department working with other educators. We're not just in theater working with other theater faculty and students. We are working with everyone across campus because they have something that we want to show to other students, that we want to show our prospective students, our current students. And so it's them seeking me out and our services at the in marketing, but it's also us seeking them out. And then from there, I think that those relationships naturally come out of that. Stopping to chat with the person, to talk with someone in physical plant who might be doing the landscaping, that's just as beneficial to me as stopping to talk to someone in the art department. Everybody on campus does something. They're not just in their own silos. And that's why that's so important, is to remember that it's about breaking those barriers and seeking out those relationships because we all work together.
It's great to hear that everybody wants to work with Marcom and people are kind of proactively doing that. How have you sort of managed your bandwidth? Because everybody wants their event photographed, everybody wants their class photographed, their poster presentation photographed, but we can't always say yes to everything. So how do you all prioritize what gets that attention?
Shane, that's something that has taken years to figure out because, like I said earlier, when I first started, it was a very much, okay, this person put a request in, got to go do it. This person put a request in, got to go do that one too. And over time, we've been able to shape that. Okay, where's this priority? They're all important, but first and foremost, who is this for? Is it for, is this going to be used to market to prospective students? And that's probably pretty important. Is this an event that we do annually that's important to capture? Probably so. And so thinking about those annual events, but also how those assets are going to be used on the front end allows us to make those decisions on not necessarily who is going to be covered and what event will be captured, because I have student photographers and I still try to send somebody. It is truly about what we have available. But we only have so many resources available to us. Um, but I think first and foremost, we try to think about who is going to be seeing this and is this going to be used to market the university, because that's what marketing and communications is there for. It's to market the university to our prospective students. And then we also want our current students to see it, because it's just as retention is just as important as getting those students as new students. And so if we look at it through that lens, that really helps us to focus in on maybe this event is important and Alyssa needs to be here, but maybe we can still get a student here because it is important. It just doesn't have the same kind of how it's going to be used, I should say.
Student photographers are probably one of the most underappreciated aspects of managing a Markov department on a college campus, because there's just so much going on and there's no way for one person to photograph it all.
My student photographers are wonderful. I have worked with many over the years, and having that opportunity to mentor them and share experiences. I say, hey, when I was a student, we all go back to that. When I was a student or when I was younger, I didn't know this, I didn't understand this, but now it's an opportunity to share with them like, hey, this is something I wish that I had known. And you're getting this opportunity now while you're still in school. Maybe if I can help get you on the right track or expose you to something that I wouldn't have thought about, just like higher education photography. I didn't realize that was an actual occupation until the university was looking to hire after their photographer of 20 some years retired. So working with student photographers in that way is huge. But I can also say I've been on 3 maternity leaves now, and each maternity leave, I have had some incredible students step up and help to fill the shoes of continuing photography while I've been out. And I think that says a lot about our students, and we do have a very gracious campus, and that individuals are very appreciative and they're very quick to say thank you and to compliment them and say how well they did. It's a tough job, and that's the only thing that I do. So to think that a student who is going to school full time, maybe working another occupation, maybe, that it's a lot. So yes, it is an underappreciated at times.
I always think when we have really impressive students at Muhlenberg as well. I always just think back to like when I was 19 or 20 in college, I wasn't doing any of this. I wasn't doing anything. I was just going to class and coming home, and that's it. And these kids are, doing photography here, and they have a part-time job, and they're in clubs, and it's pretty astonishing.
It is. It really is.
So I want to talk about your relationship with campus and Marcom leadership, and in general, kind of the folks, that would be deemed sort of behind the scenes or not the forward facing Marcom professionals on campus. How have you seen sort of views and attitudes towards roles like yours evolve over your career, and how can campus and Marcom leaders continue to address some of the attitudes that maybe downplay some of these roles?
Let's see. So think about how leadership views our roles. Back to when I first started, I think we were going through a little bit of leadership, not turnover, but maybe evolution. The department was kind of itself it was evolving. And I think that when I first started, it was more of okay, photography is important. We see that we need a photographer. So now let's think about how, let me think. When I started, it was university relations. So it was just thinking, okay, we're just managing the relations of the university. But when my director who hired me, she took over, she was seeing ahead. She was looking at, okay, we're actually marketing, we're actually communications. We are here for the university, but we are not. We are here to market the university. And so we went through an actual department name change. And as people in our department either transitioned into other roles off campus and we hired new people, we were a little bit more strategic with what those roles did. And so being able to hire people who, we have a graphic designer, a photographer, a videographer, a social media manager, a communication specialist, a web relations, a web person. And then of course our a CRM person. So all that to say, these roles were not there when I started. We had a few of them, but we didn't have all of them. And so I think for my director to have that foresight of seeing this is what it needs to look like so that we can market the university, we need to have specialists in those areas who will do that. And I think that the leadership above her maybe didn't always understand it, but were supportive and they could see the direction that she was going. And I think fast forward to COVID, that really expedited that because it was like, oh my gosh, you guys are marketing and communications. How do we need to communicate this? And so all of a sudden, we were really being seen as the people that could help communicate this during that unprecedented time. And so each year after COVID, I think that our leadership has really seen, really understood more what marketing and communication does for the university, but also for the community, because we're not just communicating here, we are communicating outside there too, because we want for it to be out in the media. That way they come back. That goes to the prospective students and their families, or a friend who tells, that word of mouth. And so that in turn will come back to us. Since I've been there, I've put myself in uncomfortable situations that help me to grow and understand a little bit even more behind the scenes of behind the scenes. And so maybe on an executive level, I've had an opportunity to have a seat at the executive cabinet level and see why decisions are being made or how they're being thought about. And I think that gave me another renewed perspective on university happenings, things that we're not always privy to. And I think that seeing that, though, also showed me that, okay, the executive cabinet respects what marketing does and what my executive director does. I see how they have been supportive, where I might not have thought that initially, because sometimes actions are louder than words. That we know that's true. And so being able to see that component behind the scenes has helped me to see how leadership has been trusting of the marketing department and of our executive director.
2 points that you made are spot on. The one about that kind of communication from the top down in terms of from the cabinet level to, folks removed from cabinet is so important, because it just gives you a better sense of what your work means for the bigger picture of the institution. And I just think that's helpful for everybody. And the other point you made about, you mentioned COVID-19, and my guest a couple episodes ago, Terry Flannery, was talking about this as well, about Marcom's sort of strategic importance has never been higher than during the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's sort of a momentum there that we've kept up since, partially because there's so many crises happening in higher ed that we have to address. But our value spans, way beyond social media and promotion. We became strategic thought leaders in terms of how do we communicate this with our students and do so, empathetically and taking into account their needs and what they need to hear from us. And I think, video and photo were so essential during that time, because it was the way that students could connect back to their campus that they weren't on, or they were, joining remotely. And so it's a great point that you just made in terms of Marcom's strategic value being higher than ever. And I think it's great to hear that you've had that experience at the sort of the cabinet level. I think it's pretty rare for creative professionals. So
It is.
It's a great segue to what I want to ask you about next, which is shifting gears to kind of your career journey. You're somebody that I've seen on LinkedIn and other platforms talking really intentionally about leadership. So I'm wondering, what advice, as you're growing on your leadership journey, what advice would you give folks in similar roles, creative professionals, about growing as leaders? And then how can marketing leaders and campus leaders help folks in the creative professions grow their leadership skills and kind of spread their wings?
One piece of advice that I would give to someone who is trying to grow, particularly in their leadership, is to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Don't do what is comfortable. Don't do what is natural. Do something that is the complete opposite of that. Because it's true, when we put ourselves in those uncomfortable situations, we are going to grow. I guess that's why they call it a growing pain, because it's for the positive, but it doesn't necessarily feel good. Go to a conference that's not specifically for a creative and see what you can learn from it. Go
Yes.
to a meeting that isn't necessarily for you, or if you find yourself at a meeting that you're like, what in the world am I doing here? I do not have a say in this. What my presence matters not. Maybe see how the person is deliberating, maybe see how they're leading the meeting, see how an agenda is created. I mean, these sounds like very rudimentary concepts. These are kind of those soft skills that you don't necessarily learn or nobody teaches you. But if you go into a situation like that with the mindset of, okay, I'm going to take away one thing. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to be just, a sponge here, because that's going to serve you well. I feel that's a good leadership skill, going in and seeing what the takeaway is, because that's going to serve you whether you go into your department or you go into another area of campus. You find yourself out and about needing to give an elevator pitch. You never know. And so I think just being open-minded like that is really going to be helpful. And I think that being open-minded comes from being able to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And I think that that's key to growth, but especially as a leader.
Yeah, I first of all, I love the point about going to a conference that's not necessarily your realm. I've gone to the NAGAP summit, the graduate enrollment summit, the last 2 years, and I'm not an enrollment management professional by any means, but I think as marketers, we're all keenly aware that we need to drive enrollment, and so just hearing from
Yes.
folks like that, experts in their field, is really helpful. And you're right about going to meetings and interacting with others. I think Seth Odell, who hosts the Higher Ed Pulse here with Mallory on Enrollify, talks about things like being able to hold your own with your CFO in a conversation. You don't have to be a financial expert, but you'll be surprised how beneficial it can be to be able to kind of participate in those conversations and kind of hang in those circles. So really, really point well made there by you. And so I want to close out, Alyssa, by asking kind of another question about something I feel really passionate about, is folks that aren't necessarily kind of on the front end of things from a Marcom realm, the maybe the less heralded positions like social media professionals, web professionals, photographers and videographers. I think have such a keen sense of marketing strategy that's really untapped and should be considered for CMO and vice president roles, in my opinion. I'm curious to hear if you agree with that, and if so, why do you think that roles in the creative fields and sort of behind the scenes roles should be considered for those types of leadership positions?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. That creatives and people in marketing and communications should be considered for a CMO role, because when you have a seat at the executive cabinet level, at that table, you see that you have someone there representing advancement. You have someone representing athletics, enrollment, and a couple other areas. And so they are experts in their level or in their area. And so if you don't have someone who's an expert in marketing, then you're missing a part of that. You might have some marketing might fall underneath one of those other executives, and they respect what you do, they trust what you do, but you're not a seat at that table. You're trusting that they are going to know what they are talking about when they come there, go to that table to have a discussion. And so I think that having someone like a videographer or a marketer or a social media manager have a seat at that table will be able to provide a different perspective that maybe this other person didn't think about. Obviously, an enrollment person is going to think of it through that lens, and so it's not lost on them maybe why we're trying to market something or how we're trying, what that strategic move is. But I think that having someone there from marketing who knows what they're talking about, that it has maybe gone to school for it or has so many years of experience in it, they can see and speak from their experience. I think it's important to be able to share that perspective as well, because that's exactly what those other individuals are doing. And so why don't those positions have that opportunity? I think they absolutely need to have that opportunity and be respected in what they do and be trusted ultimately. If you're going to hire someone for a position and you believe that they can do that position, then they also need to have that opportunity and trust to of what you have hired them for, and to provide that that direction.
Yeah, it's one of my wishes for higher ed marketing's future that I'm not sure will ever happen, but I think if I were to have my way, every institution would have a chief communications officer and a chief marketing officer, because they're two very different things. And I think, I would absolutely love to see more uh, videographers, designers, photographers, social media professionals be considered for those CMO roles, because I just think there's just such an untapped strategic potential there that I think as an industry we need to work on. And so I'm glad that you and I were able to have this conversation today. And we joked before, but we finally made it. We had delays in life, but it was so good to talk to you, Alyssa, and would encourage everybody listening to connect with Alyssa on LinkedIn. She's active on there, and like I said, one of kind of the rising stars that I see in higher ed marketing. So thanks so much, Alyssa, and hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. Thanks so much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your hosts. Learn from Dave Cabilds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.